Okay. So yes, so we will start on time to be respectful of everyone's time and including our wonderful guest speaker. My name is Janice Thomas. I have the pleasure of serving as Director of International Education here at Brookdale Community College. And we are absolutely delighted to be partnering with New Jersey Haiti Partners again in the 5th annual Clinton C. Crocker Memorial Lecture. I don't know if she's on the call yet, but I do want to acknowledge Dr. Terry Kahn because she is the one who connected us with New Jersey Haiti Partners 5 years ago when she was the faculty coordinator for our Global Citizenship Distinction Program. The mission of the International Education Center is to promote global opportunities for our campus community. And we do that in a number of ways by recruiting and supporting international students, by supporting study abroad, by promoting and coordinating and partnering with organizations such as this in developing co-curricular programs and in general, ensuring that there is a global presence that is infused both in our disciplines, in all of our disciplines, as well as in the co-curriculum. So these types of events, the lectures that we have, the international festivals that we have, and certainly partnering with community organizations like New Jersey Haiti Partners allows us to help us fulfill our mission. So thank you for thinking of partnering with Brookdale in this initiative. And we're delighted to be in our 5th year of this collaboration. So I'd like to now turn the floor over to Ed Johnson to also bring a few words of greeting.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm very glad to join you today for the annual series. It's something that we really look forward to. And this year's a 5th annual Clinton Crocker Memorial Lecture Series. And, you know, while we can't be together in person, and as Dr. Thomas said, we love to have you on our beautiful campus. And so I'm pretending I'm on our campus with my virtual background. However, I think Karine is the winner tonight with her virtual background. But I wanted to be here just to say thank you. And on behalf of David Stout, our president, who will hopefully join us in a few minutes. He's involved in a meeting with our board of trustees. Tonight seems to be meeting night for Brookdale from start to finish. And then I'm going to leave here for another meeting. But I certainly wanted to join you for a couple of minutes to just give you words of welcome. And, you know, this has been a challenging year for all of us. And I think joining together tonight to celebrate the 5th annual Clinton Crocker Memorial Lecture Series, which Dr. Thomas reminded me was also a member of our Board of Trustees at Brookdale. So I think this adds some normalcy to bring us together, to join and to fellowship together and to participate in a normal activity, which is very important to Brookdale Community College. We're glad to partner with the International Education Center and with community partners such as New Jersey Haiti Partners to support this very important lecture series and each year to bring new speakers to spark conversations and new information, and just to keep the conversation and thought processes going and the learning process at Brookdale through this vehicle. I'm glad to be here, and I am hopeful that Dr. Stout will be here. He's planning to be here, as I said, so he will join us sometime during the program. Welcome. We're glad to be here. We're very glad to join you. And this is another difficult year for us. We'll see this through, and we will join together again in person. I know that. we'll continue this lecture series as a important and annual part of Brookdale Community College and the communities that we serve. So thank you and welcome, and I hope that you enjoy the program tonight.
Great. Thanks, Ed. Really appreciate you being here, and always appreciate the support of our Governmental Affairs Office. So Karine, I think I'd like to turn it over to you, and we'll keep an eye out if Dr. Stout is able to join us. We'll just interrupt and allow him to say a few words.
Great. Welcome, everyone. I am Karine Delis Kircher. I am the current president of the New Jersey chapter of New Jersey Haiti Partners. I want to acknowledge the wife of our late founder, Doris Crocker, who's here, one of his kids, Leah Crocker, who's also with us this evening. So wonderful to have you here. And we also have members of our Haiti chapter in attendance, Mr. Mario Henry. So it's really wonderful to have you here. And on this fifth annual event that we're having, it's really great to have some brand new people who are joining us, as well as some folks who were here from the very first year. So it's really exciting to be able to honor Clinton in this way. He served a lot in terms of education, not just at the trustee level at Brookdale, but also person to person. He made these international students feel like his kids. And they often, talk to him like he was their dad. And, he was a great person to talk to. And like I love to remember, he only charged 2 cents for his advice. So wonderful advice, but a very warm personality. So it gives us such great pleasure to be able to create something in his honor with one of the institutions that was near and dear to his heart. And so as far as New Jersey Haiti Partners is concerned, we have been continuously operating since 1976, both our chapters in Haiti as well as the chapter here in the United States. That's no small feat, because through ups and downs, even through the pandemic, we are continuing to do things to change and to evolve and to serve the communities that we serve both in Haiti and here in the United States. So it's something that has been a great pleasure for me to be a part of for the past 22 years. I like to say that many of us are lifers. We come here and we are dedicated. This is not something that we do to fluff our resume. This is something that we truly believe in, and we make lifelong friends in this organization to try and make a better life for Haitians in Haiti, as well as for Haitian Americans in New Jersey. But, because of the internet, we're not limited to that. So if you are someplace other than New Jersey and you would like to be a part of us, we certainly welcome you joining hands with us. So let me give you a quick background on a couple of the projects that we have going on. Every year we host this event for the past 5 years. We also have been hosting a scholarship event on Flag Day, where we honor folks in the community in New Jersey, as well as give out scholarships. So, which we hope to continue improving on every year. We also have a project called Haiti Hope House, where kids receive instruction. They receive after school instruction in a safe environment. And they also learn skills. Some of them are learning skills such as project management, but some of them are also learning skills such as how to be an electrician, how to be a translator. So these are things that, even though they may not be of working age yet, these are skills that can help them support their families or give a hand to their families. We also have projects that Mario and the rest of the Haiti team are working on. In the past, we have worked with other organizations such as the YMCA, such as Toastmasters, and we work on a variety of topics and agendas to be able to make life better for students, for business people, for young professionals. And we have more coming. So we do invite you to join us. If you want our contact information, please talk to us in the chat, but after our speaker. And development in Haiti is something which is very important. It cannot be overstated. So we want to know what is going on, what is possible. So this is why we do this annual event, to make sure that we bring something which is of international stature, but also of real interest to Haitians, Haitian Americans, as well as to New Jersey Americans, New Jerseyans at large, to be a part of this conversation. So it's my honor to be a member of this organization and to serve in a leadership role. I haven't always served in a leadership role, but we do want more people. We do want fresh blood. We do want fresh ideas. So we do welcome people who have the heart to serve, to become a part of us and to participate and to run some committees. So if there's something you think that we should be doing that we're not doing, perhaps you're the right person to lead that effort. I want to acknowledge Nadine Etienne, who is our secretary, who's done a lot of work to keep to keep both teams, well, and not both teams, because New Jersey, Haiti, as well as Brookdale Community College, to keep everything together. So thank you, Nadine, you've been outstanding. Thank you, Dr. Khan, for being here. And there are so many other people. I just want to say thank you all for being here and being part of this conversation. And thank you for our keynote speaker who is here today. And I'm sure we're going to hear some delightful things, and that this will be a great, great discussion. So without further ado, I pass it back. Thank you.
Doris, do you want to say a few words?
Oh, I only want to say I'm happy to see all of you here. I wish Clinton could be here, and maybe he is, who knows? He loved Brookdale and he loved Haiti. So let's pretend he's here. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Doris.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're very fortunate this evening. By the way, Janice, could you page down so that we can see Mr. Tripathi's bio?
What?
I'm speaking to Janice. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Please. Okay, there we go. So that some of you can be reading that as he gives, as he opens up. Now, we're very fortunate to have Mr. Tripathi speak to us tonight. He is UN Assistant Secretary General and Director of the New York office of the UN Environmental Program and Secretary of the UN Environment Management Group. He's a double threat. He's a development economist and a lawyer with over 40 years experience. And he's had a very distinguished career with the UN since 1998. 3 different continents, 4 major areas: climate change, human rights, democratic governance, and legal affairs. I'm especially interested in what he's done with finance, because he's in both Indonesia and India. He's established facilities that bring significant private sector funds into transformative, as he says, transformative and social and environmental impacts for millions of people. Well, now there's a tough act to follow. Now, when I used to talk about Haiti to people, I would say, in terms of the environment, wherever the rest of the world is going, Haiti's got there first. But the flip side of that is that if we can achieve sustainable development in Haiti, then there may be hope for the rest of the planet. And I think there's nobody better qualified to talk to us about that than Mr. Tripathi. So let's listen to him.
Thank you. Should I start?
Please.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so very much for the warm invitation to join the conversation this evening. I take this responsibility very seriously, and I'll explain why. Because I have been a strong believer, and I've worked with the UN for a while now, but I come and go in the sense that I join the UN for a bit and then I go away and do other things, and then I come back again because there are friends in the UN that would invite me back to do something. And so it's been my nth incarnation with the UN, the latest one being the current assignment I am in. Um, and every time I have looked at Haiti, I used to serve in Liberia nearly 20 years ago when the Accra Peace Accord was signed, and Liberia was coming out of the chaotic situation it found itself in. And this was in October 2003 is when they signed the Accra Peace Accords. And I was invited to go there, or I was directed to go there and help with the recovery process. And so as I started reading up on Liberia, I realized that what a tremendous promise lost. It was the first country on the continent to be a free country. And that even in the as late as the 1970s, Liberia had a per capita income equivalent to that of Japan. Difficult to believe. And when I arrived there to put in my small little contribution to a big evolving process, the entire revenue of the country was only about $60 million. And then this is a country with 84% arable land, and one of the very few water surplus countries in the entire continent of Africa. And a country that had literally brought independent thinking and everything else to a continent suffering from the worst kind of tyranny and colonialism. And still, it just takes a few bad leaders to turn the whole thing around. So it was literally, to me, it was paradise lost. And I worked for Madam Johnson Sirleaf, who was then she was elected as the president after the transitional process. And then, of course, I ended up leaving in 2006 to head the UN's tsunami recovery program, working with President Clinton at that time, who was the political envoy for tsunami recovery in 2006. And I became the UN recovery coordinator, coordinating that $7 billion recovery program for the Boxing Day tsunami. And so having made these journeys, and then when I was invited to share my thoughts at this distinguished lecture today, of course, I have read up on Haiti quite a few times before. So it's something that had held a lot of interest for me because as a young person, I read the biography of Napoleon Bonaparte. And then, of course, you can't read about Napoleon without reading of his conquests and the colony at that time, and the 50,000 soldiers they lost in the process of reclaiming the colony, and everything else. I mean, these are all matters of history. But what held my interest was why. The question is always, that's a question I always ask. I'm a very curious person, and my question was why? Why would Napoleon send some of his finest generals all the way to a country this far? And of course, the answer was very simple, that it was one of the wealthiest parts of the world at that time. And then to dial back to present day and to see the situation in Haiti, you really, the parallels are striking in terms of how possibilities become challenges, but then again, challenges can be opportunities. So that's how the cycle works. And the fact that we're having this conversation today, and I often come across colleagues that speak very endearingly of the country and the possibilities there, gives me hope. So I'll share with those framing comments. I'll break down the lecture into three parts. The first being, what is it that the UNEP the organization I work for, what is it doing there? I think it's important information for those that are looking to partner with UNEP, or see some possibilities in terms of what we are doing there, where or tell us if we can do something better or differently. But I would also like to speak a bit about possibilities. I'll share the experience from India and Indonesia, where I played an instrumental role in establishing these facilities, and and together the projects we facilitated are actually up and running. So these are not ideas on paper. The one in Indonesia was already an investment of $350 million, and it is a social compact between people and planet, and I'll explain how. The one in India is something that converts an entire state of 50 million people to zero chemical agriculture. And they have about 6 million farmers. And as of today, they have already converted 1 million farmers as part of that program. And the investment there is $2.6 billion, but it is cost neutral to the government. And I'll explain how it is cost neutral to the government and how is that transformation unfolding. So I believe in possibilities. Are they easy? They never are easy. They're extremely challenging. But when the right thinking people come together and work selflessly to advance a vision that everybody buys into, everything is possible. And I've seen this quite a few times in my short existence on this planet. And I would be happy to work with anyone that might feel that the ideas that have been tried out successfully before could possibly resonate with Haiti, and then we could do something meaningful there. And I'm not talking of small projects. I mean, they are extremely important, community level engagements, a few million here and there. But what Haiti needs is large scale investments that can really engage people and bring the best out in them. And that could be truly transformative. So let me just spend a little bit of time on UNEP. So UNEP stands on the front line of systemic challenges, including economic turmoil and inflation, even before COVID-19 struck. As I was discussing with my colleagues, and they were briefing me for this lecture, they were talking about the poverty trap, social unrest, the political and institutional gridlocks, and then, of course, the brain drain and the mass migrations, and of course, the risks of famine and what have you, and challenges that are closely interconnected with the multiple forms of environmental crises hitting the country, including the impacts of climate change, uh, massive loss of ecosystems and associated services, severe pollution, and depletion of natural resources and food stocks. As you all know, vegetation in Haiti, which was formerly dense, has suffered over several decades of overexploitation. It's now reduced to savannas, open forests, and vestiges of closed forests, which are made up of broadleaf trees and conifers. There's a severe shortage of water and destructive tropical storms, and the agriculture hardly meets the basic needs of a population, especially in the context of the demographic transition or the population explosion that is clearly visible in Haiti. And this, of course, has contributed to an excessive exploitation of the environment, leading to overuse and loss of land through acceleration of erosion, and productivity is pretty low because of weak means of production and inefficient marketing channels. Most farms are small-sized, family-owned, and primarily geared towards self-sufficiency, while export crops are grown on larger plantations. I mean, these are things that I thought I might share a bit in terms of our own assessment of what we see. We have a rather large group of colleagues that are based in Haiti, and they're working from our Caribbean offices, as well as our Latin America regional headquarters out of Panama. And So this is not a happy picture, especially in terms of a growing population and the basic needs that the population has that must be met for it to be a productive society and for it to achieve its true potential, both in terms of human development as well as economic development and environmental sustainability. And of course, water resources are also under tremendous pressure over the last few decades. And again, it comes back to the demographic growth. And then when water resources are under stress, and of course you have the tropical storms and hurricanes and what have you, um, even though it has a coastal marine area or coastal waters, be it the territorial waters or the continental slope or the continental shelf, they're potentially rich, but they have also been extremely exploited over the last few decades. And that overexploitation is aggravated by the contamination of the coastal area and the sea due to the dumping of waste material. And that's, of course, a problem around the world with developing countries, but it's particularly telling in Haiti. And then, of course, this coastal crisis also leads to the uh, exploitation and decimation of mangrove forests and fishery resources. Um, added that to Add that to soil erosion and emptying of fuel tanks in Haiti's territorial waters and everything else. So it's a caustic mix of everything problematic that you could possibly think of. Last year, of course, the national GDP contracted as a consequence of several months of lockdown in the country, fuel shortages, civil unrest, and what have you. Um, the UN's humanitarian response plan for 2020, and this is all before COVID-19, pointed to 4.6 million Haitians in need of humanitarian support out of a 11 million population. And of course, that population number makes it the largest country in the Caribbean. And of course, the World Bank then predicted that the GDP will continue to contract at least until 2022. And then, of course, there was the double whammy or the triple whammy with COVID-19, putting Haiti literally on the brink of systemic collapse, including high risk of famine. Now, this is primarily what the situation is. And of course, this is not a reflection on what Haiti can be, but what it is. And most of the time, it is mismanagement and poor governance that creates these situations. And Haiti is no exception. Wherever you see these situations, people are the last to blame. They are invariably the victims of a trap set for them um, by leaders that really show little care or concern for the people that they are supposed to represent. And then of course you have alternating cycles. Sometimes you could have political leadership that's really well-meaning and all, but they don't last for a very long time. And then it goes back to the same. So the poor governance trap, as they call it, continues. So while you may have honorable exceptions in leaders getting into office occasionally, but they don't stay long enough because of the uh, high moral standards and ethics and integrity and accountability. They just can't, to put it more crudely, play the game that others are up to. So in terms of the work that UNEP does, it primarily aims to support national institutions and strengthen uh, strategic environmental partnerships with a view to implementing an ecosystem-based approach that will continue to contribute to resilient economic growth and sustainable development in Haiti in the framework of the 2030 Agenda, which is also known as the Sustainable Development Goals. The 17 goals and the 169 targets under those goals are kind of the guidepost for what the UN does with member states and partner organizations and all kinds of stakeholders. The National Environmental Governance Program that we have contributed to. It seeks to strengthen environmental governance with the necessary tools for a better understanding of the challenges. As is popularly said, if you can't measure something, you can't manage it. And so I think having the tools that give you a greater understanding of what really are the challenges helps you with evidence-based informed decision making. And then there is the regional grants, so Sustainable Development Program, which is intended to provide backing to local capabilities in restoring ecosystems and environmental services, in developing a green, blue, and circular economy, in adapting to climate change, in reducing the risks of disasters, and in promoting energy and renewables. Within the 2010 to 2020 timeframe, which just ended, um, uh, we have seen good results, such as the government declaration of the first 9 marine protected areas of the country. 26 are in place nowadays. The first electric cooperative of Haiti, connecting over 1,400 households via solar energy. The first coastal native plants nursery, paving the way for natural coastal protection schemes. The first green economy assessment, resulting in the development of targeted value chains, and the first municipal solid waste management plan in Les Cayes, allowing upcoming strategic local interventions on waste to energy through plastic recycling. We've also been a lead promoter and critical partner in the design, establishment, and operation of the National Fund for Protected Areas and Biodiversity of Haiti. It has mobilized approximately $25 million of seed funding. And we're also helping set up the first environmental information system of Haiti, including broad consultations and gap analysis, mobilization of expertise, establishing institutional arrangements and conditions for further support from other partners. In March this year, we helped finalize the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, which is called the NBSAP. And the current interventions are in line with its priorities. The Directed by the famous Haitian filmmaker Arnold Antonin, the documentary Thus Spoke the Sea was produced and released with UNEP support, and it has become a strategic tool at the center of a massive communication and awareness raising campaign to rebuild the connection between Haitians and their environment, and repositioning environment as a solution to Haiti's security, stability, and resilience. And it was, I'm happy to let you know that reputed French environmentalist and filmmaker Yann Arthus Bertrand, he recently was full of praise for this documentary. And we are also working with the government on the implementation of international obligations of Haiti in the context of environmental conventions on biodiversity, climate change, desertification, and also in its participation in international negotiations as a small island developing state. So there are a lot of these things going on at this time. We're also working on 4 highly important marine protected areas, both in terms of biodiversity and tourism development. For example, the Macaya National Natural Park, Port Salut, Point Abaku, Ilavache, and La Cajuane. The strengthening of agricultural production systems, the development of sustainable value chains, agroforestry, mangrove transplantation, riverbank strengthening, and so a lot of these activities are currently underway, and as they provide critical pathways for higher resilience of local communities, especially improved food security and stronger natural protections. And some of these programs that I mentioned have about 6,500 people actively participating and benefiting directly from these activities, with 44% being women. Now, all these things are happening, and then of course there's a larger UN program that's going on, which is called the One UN Plan, where environment is a cross-cutting perspective, and fundamentally important in terms of employment, livelihoods, and resilience. And UNEP is also engaged in the post-COVID-19 recovery plan through a large socioeconomic study to be carried out across the country, and which will ultimately lead to development of joint initiatives at the field level. So that's basically what it is in terms of, I mean, there's a lot else that is also going on, but I just wanted to offer a little flavor of what UNEP is doing. But what is important is to think outside the box, and look for innovative solutions to mainstream environmental benefits in terms of resilience and growth, such as national mechanism of payment for environmental services, a green national GDP, the creation of a green tax, and tariff barriers to protect Haitian green and blue economy stakeholders, and related production, um, um, either on land or in sea. So that with that, I would step back a little and talk a little bit about the possibilities. And in that, let me take you a little far away from here to Indonesia, which is pretty much halfway around the world, which is, now if you have seen, or if you can Google and find it, there's something called the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in the United States, NOAA, which basically gives us all the information on the hurricanes, the tropical storms, and what have you. They have a bunch of time series videos on cloud cover, which are primarily indicators of rainfall factories. So if you look at the time series over the last 100 years, and it just runs like a film. It's a short one, maybe 30 seconds or 40 seconds, but it tells you how every year, where have been the water concentrations in the atmosphere. And if you look that up, you will find that over the Southeast Asian geographical region and over the Amazons in the Americas, especially South America, you would find that there's a deep purple color there, because there the water concentration is the highest. And of course, it's not rocket science to understand why, because they're right over the most significant forest resources that the world has in two different parts of the world. And they actually produce all the rainfall across large areas, and nobody ever goes to thank these countries for keeping their forests, because that's what grows food in different parts of the world. Yes, the trade winds and the oceanic currents and everything else move the precipitation clouds around, but that doesn't produce water. Water is produced because of evaporation or evapotranspiration, or the ecosystem-based rainfall cycles, where water, so that constant exchange of water is happening between the atmosphere, the canopy, and the soil underneath. And when we forget that, then of course we have serious problems. So that's how Indonesia became the first such place where we would try this. And when I set up something called the Tropical Landscapes Finance Facility there, I wasn't working for anyone, I was working pro bono. And of course, we had a lot of partners, including the UN, which contributed to setting that up. But I was working pro bono because I thought that I owed it to the country, because I was there for several years before as the UN Recovery Coordinator, helping coordinate the $7 billion program. And I had been greatly touched by the affection and the kindness of the people there. And I had seen the forest literally wither away in front of my eyes. And being an environmentalist myself, I said, there has to be a way that you can do this, where you can leverage private finance for public good. So we set out to, we set this institution up. It's a public institution. I'm not there anymore. I'm not associated with it anymore, but it thrives because I played a small part. I was just the catalyst. A large number of public spirited individuals, Indonesians, who came together to capitalize on the opportunity. And it doesn't need a lot of money. The government doesn't put a single penny into it, but the government does support it very strongly, without which this will not happen. And the first project is $350 million. It's a partnership with Michelin, the tire company. We took a forest landscape of 400,000 hectares, which is pretty much 7 times the size of the country Singapore. And taking that, they had already lost 88,000 hectares of land around that forest that had become degraded. So the government has given that as a concession to an Indonesian subsidiary or a joint venture of Michelin. And so the narrative is about people. So the 50,000 people that were actually being used by uh, smugglers and illegal loggers to plunder the forest, they are the same people who are protecting the forest now. So if you don't work with people, you cannot protect the planet. Anybody that tells you otherwise is lying. People have to be at the heart of the solution, not because I'm a bad person and so you need to pay me off to keep me on your good side. Not that, because people have needs, people have families, people need to look after their families like all of us. So when we ignore that vital reality, that fundamental principle of life, why is it that we care so much about our families? Because that's how social structures are, that's how kinship works. So if you don't understand that basic principle, you'll keep talking. And that's what we've been doing. If you look at the last 30 years, what has been the conversation about climate change? The conversation has been about that some countries have polluted the earth much more than others, which is a fact, and that these wealthy countries should put up the money that is needed to change behavior, change technology, and that's what has been going on for pretty much 30 years now. It is anchored around something called Common but Differentiated Responsibility, CBDR is how the acronym goes, is that yes, there should be a common environmental standard, but the responsibilities to get to that standard should be differentiated. If the standard should be that there should be 2 tons per capita carbon footprint, then those that are under 2 tons should be able to go to 2 tons and keep developing till that number. Those that are at 10 or 15 should come down to 2. And of course, nobody agrees because we don't see ourselves as a community. That community spirit, that fellow feeling is not there. It's us versus them. And that's why we've been talking about it for 30 years, achieving precious little. And we keep meeting and keep meeting and keep meeting, achieving nothing. And that's what actually drove us, a group of well-meaning people, to set this up. And now the result is that this particular project has zero government subsidies, zero government investments, all private money, and employs 50,000 people, 16,000 directly, 34,000 indirectly. And in that 88,000 hectares of degraded land, 38,000 hectares is the world's largest sustainable rubber plantation, with productivity more than twice the average productivity of rubber in Indonesia. And another 50,000 hectares is a conservation area, protecting and bringing up a high conservation value forest by WWF International. So it's both going hand in hand. And then we went to the capital markets actually, and we're able to raise the money. So it's not one person that has invested. A lot of people have come together to invest. The first tranche was $95 million, which was disbursed in 2018. That was almost 3 years ago. And the second tranche of 130 million will be due very soon. And that facility is now actually working on an investment pipeline of $5 billion with zero government money, zero government subsidies, and private investments in nature, in forests, in people. So it is possible. Anybody that tells you otherwise either doesn't know what they're talking or doesn't want to dwell on the possibilities that are there for all of us to see. We took the same idea to India. The state of Andhra Pradesh in the east coast of India, it has pretty much 1,000-kilometer coastline. And there, and I add that because Haiti is pretty much something similar. Not, of course, not in population. The population is not 50 million, but in terms of size and complexity and coastal waters and mountains and river plains, it's kind of a similar topography. And there, it is 6 million farmers that the state has are actually converting to zero chemical farming. As of today, they have already converted 1 million farmers. And this project started roughly 4 years ago. And it is cost neutral to implement it, because as of today, the government there in a year spends roughly $2 billion in subsidies. Fertilizer subsidies, $400 million. Farm electricity subsidies, another $700 million. Farm loan waivers, interest subvention schemes, one could go. So every year, they're actually spending $2 billion. Whereas if you actually went into natural farming, the input cost drops by 80%, because we have created a very punishing arrangement for ourselves. We are actually paying to destroy ourselves when we go into chemical farming. Our children grow up sick without the possibility of ever achieving their true potential. There are studies by very respectable institutions that are now telling us that actually the pesticides that we keep pumping into our soil and into our crops, actually 0.01% ever really gets utilized. The rest of it ends up either in the underground water, because it all leaches into the water, or in the atmosphere. Very little is ever really used. And we keep doing it and doing it and doing it mindlessly. Whereas if we switched from soil chemistry to soil biology, in the initial phases, I met a lot of these scientists and agronomists who would ask me, so Mr. Tripathi, where is the nutrient coming from? Because you're not using any fertilizers. I said, well, tell me one thing. When I was a child, I was vaccinated against all kinds of diseases. Now, if you take the vaccine and you check the nutrient value of the vaccine, and to what I look now, there is no bearing, there's no comparison. Because the vaccine was not a nutrient to start with. The vaccine prevented from me getting sick so that I can live a fulfilling life and can do what I should as a good person. So that's what regenerative agriculture does. You switch from soil chemistry to soil biology. You stop using chemicals. You start using microbial substances that actually improve the quality of the soil. And actually, the project has done 1,400 independent site verification experiments by third party, not by the project implementers or anybody, outside elements. The global metric for healthy soil is roughly 70 earthworms per cubic meter. And wherever they have already done 5-6 crop cycles, we now find 120 earthworms per cubic meter of soil. So the soil is healing. Soil organic carbon is improving. More and more global research institutions are coming there, like Rodell Institute, the Boston College, Wageningen University, and all kinds of institutions are now looking at it and checking what can we do in terms of big research so that we can prove the model. And Indonesia, Mexico, Rwanda, a lot of countries around the world are looking at it and saying, wow, if this is possible, because it changes everything. The farmer spends only 20% as opposed to 100% earlier in conventional agriculture, and is able to grow more. And with every passing crop cycle, your soil becomes healthier and healthier and healthier. And it uses 50% less water. 50% less water also means 50% less electricity, because you don't need that electricity to pump that water out of the soil, which keeps getting worse and worse every year. Because earlier you could find water at 10 feet or 20 feet under the ground. Now you have to dig 200 feet to get the water. So there's so much positive that is possible. And all of it reads only, so to change a farmer, to build the capacity for the farmer to understand how to do this, it costs only $365 per farmer. That's all it takes. So for 6 million farmers, that and a little bit of institutional costs and here and there, it costs totally about $2.6 billion. And the government is already spending $2 billion every year. So once they convert everybody, they'll actually save $2 billion a year in perpetuity. So that's how it is cost neutral. KfW, the German Development Bank, just invested $300 million in that project at ultra low cost, only 0.5% interest. And mind you, they had never invested in any project of this kind anywhere on the planet, despite the fact that they invest tens of billions of dollars every year. So when the well-meaning and the right thinking people come together, so why I'm sharing this is because I'm hoping that those on this call or those on this call that know others might encourage them to think as to what is possible in Haiti. What could be that big idea? Could we just take, let's say, 1,000 hectares somewhere and bring in the community and produce a scale model and that can then be replicated? And the beauty of agriculture is that unlike forests, where you need anywhere between 7 to 10 years to show something meaningful in terms of results, agriculture, you can show results in a year actually. Because depending on whether you are rain-fed agriculture or you are agriculture by the river plains, or if you are agriculture using lift irrigation or water pumps, you could have 1 or 2 or 3 crop cycles a year. And then that's pretty much easier to prove in time scale than a forest, which takes much longer to grow and regenerate the ecosystems. And then, of course, there are the possibilities of renewable energy. So there are all kinds of possibilities, but it is possible only if everybody comes together to do something for people and planet, not to ingratiate themselves. Often people ask me when I was working pro bono to set these institutions up, why are you working for free? People ask me because people are normally suspicious. Maybe he's getting paid by somebody. Maybe he's not telling it. Maybe he's just talking about it to make himself look good. And my answer was that, well, I don't really need to explain, but since you asked, the answer is very simple. It makes me happy. Because I can genuinely, so I set this thing up in 2016. I've left the place, is thriving. And I'm sure you can feel the pride I feel when I share the example of what they're doing. They don't even know I'm talking about them because I'm not involved anymore. I left. So the point is that these possibilities are there, but it is only possible if a group of people with the right kind of passion and imagination come together. And then money, trust me, money is available in such great measure, I can't even begin to talk about it. Just to give you a small number, if you take the top 300 pension funds of the world, and there are thousands, by the way, just take the top 300, they manage $18 trillion in assets globally. And they are desperately looking for meaningful long-term investments in nature because everybody is now badgering them that you are not doing the right thing and the planet is going astray. And you guys, of all people, you really need to do something about it because pension is about the future. And so I was talking to some of the chiefs of these pension funds, and I told them, I said, if you just set aside 5% of the assets you manage, that's already $900 billion. And not for charity or anything. Invest in nature, invest in people, create those people and planet compacts. And then everything will change. And those possibilities are definitely there. So let me stop by urging you to look at the possibilities and bring together a group of people. I'll be happy to talk to you. I'll be happy to connect you to the people that are able to help. And all of this wouldn't cost anybody a penny. And I do this in my spare time. That's not my work at UNEP. I have other stuff that I'm responsible for. But in my personal time, of course, I can do what makes me happy, like all of us. And I'll be very happy to join hands with you. And then trust me, you will see when you can pull this off. And we're already working actually. As part of my um, support to well-meaning people in my spare time, we're already working with a bunch of ministers in the Bahamas, in Jamaica, in Guyana, in Suriname, in Barbados. So other countries in the Caribbean, actually, to see how we can improve food security. Because CARICOM recently announced that a scheme called 25 by 25 or 25 by 5. What it means is that currently they import 95% of the goods and services that is consumed in the Caribbean. And of course, the reason being that the massive resorts and all, which of course now they're mostly closed, but they'll come back to life in a few months' time, one hopes. And so they have decided that they want to reduce the imports by 25% in the next 5 years. And people have to produce locally, or the people that are consuming, especially these resorts, will have to buy locally. That gives a serious impetus to local businesses. And also we are working with a whole group of stakeholders. And just to give you an example, we're working with some of the big companies to set up something in Jamaica, in a small farm of roughly 400 acres. And that 400-acre farm, intensive sustainable agriculture, mixed farming, including eggs and dairy, leafy greens, as well as other vegetables, can actually pretty much take care of all the needs of Jamaica. So they really don't need to be importing stuff from the United States or Panama or wherever else they're importing. I mean, if they need to import, they can certainly import things that they can't produce. But it is possible. And then when we approach these people that are producing something similar, talking to, and I often give the example of the Netherlands, which even if you look closely, very closely, you'll actually miss that country in the map. It's like a dot in the map if you're looking at a small map. And that country is the world's second largest agricultural exporter. Second largest agricultural exporter in value terms for the entire planet. That's the level of efficiency they have reached. Haiti is much bigger in size. So it is certainly possible. And creating that social compact, creating that compact between people and planet, so that, because that is your greatest bulwark against bad politicians. When people are involved and their families are getting fed and their children are getting better health care and going to school. And I often say this, that when people at the bottom of the pyramid prosper, the entire planet prospers. Rich people, when they have a little more money, and imagine how terrible this is. When COVID started, the billionaires of the world had $8.9 trillion between them. Now they have $11.2 trillion. Whereas everybody else has been impoverished and is literally struggling to make ends meet. The social inequity in this whole arrangement, I don't need to tell you, I'm sure you've read about it all yourselves, how marginalized communities have suffered across the planet, not just in the United States, but everywhere. They are the greatest victims of COVID-19. Their immunity levels are low, and so they are the first victims or the worst victims. That needs to change. A world that doesn't take care of 90% of its population is not a sustainable arrangement by any economic metric, whether you're talking brown economy or green economy. And that's what needs to change, because the top 10% people actually own 90% of the assets in the world. That's not a sustainable arrangement by any means. But that can change if the well-meaning people come together and create these kind of social compacts and give a little bit of their time. We can sustain ourselves through other means. We have time, we consult and we do this, but setting aside a bit of our time and to show that we really care for people that matter the most. There's no greater happiness than that. Thank you.
I have one question.
Yes, please.
How many people are actively involved in raising or producing these wells for water for this country?
Which country?
Conducive, I mean, in these circumstances under COVID-19.
Sorry, you are referring to which country?
Haiti.
And what's the question?
How many people are actively involved in creating these wells for?
Sorry, which wells?
Wells for productive and healthy water.
I wouldn't have that data, unfortunately, because UNEP is not engaged in digging up wells and all. UNEP's work is more broad-based in terms of groundwater and water pollution and other things. But I'm sure other UN colleagues might be involved, but I really don't have the data in terms of the wells.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Thanks.
I had a question. I know in times of economic troubles, like through this pandemic or after the 2010 earthquake, which really hit Haiti hard, there's a lot of predatory investors that come in. And when a government doesn't have the means to support a program like this, what role does the UN play to try and help them, assist them to make a sustainable future happen, or offer alternative programs so they don't go back to whoever flashes the money and just gets them through these times?
Well, the UN works very closely with the government in terms of predatory investors. I'll share with you my own experiences in other countries. As you know, you have something called the Paris Club, which is the club of multilateral donors, or lenders like the World Bank and the IMF and others. There's something also called the London Club, which is the club of the commercial lenders. What happens often is that when a country is in trouble, a lot of these investment funds, they come and buy distressed debt. So the debt that was perhaps issued for $100 is no longer viable because nobody is paying back. The country is not a going concern anymore. So what happens is that there's perhaps the $100 par value has fallen to $10 maybe. So a lot of these vulture funds come and buy those things for $10, hoping that when the country comes out of conflict, the country comes out of the situation that it finds itself in and improves, or the Paris Club goes ahead and forgives the debt, the multilateral debt, then the country has revenue to pay back. So then they try, even if they bought it for $10 and if they can make 15 out of it, they're still making 50% returns. Whereas ideally, when the Paris Club is forgiving all the debt to make the country viable again, the London Club should also do something similar. But it doesn't happen that way. So these negotiations are often quite complicated, and because commercial debt works differently from concessional debt from the World Bank or the IMF or other multilateral institutions or development finance institutions, where the relationship between an institution where the governments are members and a member government itself, where the leverages and the conversations are different. So you're absolutely right. These risks are always there. And to the extent possible, the UN works with the government in rendering sound economic advice, especially our colleagues from the IMF get involved in supporting the government, understand the true nature of what is being promised, and what are the pros and cons of the kind of offers that are being made. So the UN does get involved, but it's not the place of the UN to make any decisions. That's for the sovereign government of the country. But the UN does indeed work with the government to bring the right kind of information and analytical tools to bear on the decision-making processes in the early days. And of course, once the government builds its own capacity, then the UN excuses itself and moves out. That's how it works mostly.
So it's more the role of an advisor, basically.
That's right, because the UN has no authority.
Liaison between the
to do
different
anything
agencies.
in any country. It's up to sovereign countries. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Tripathi, in the long run, is it possible to achieve continuous sustainable development without any investment in population control?
It is, and it isn't. It all depends on the carrying capacity of the land and the size of the country. But it is also possible that, and it happens with a lot of smaller countries that are able to produce high quality human resources, then those people move out and go to other countries because they have the ability to be welcomed in other parts of the world by virtue of their education or skills or capabilities. And then they remit money. So as you know, the global remittance economy runs into hundreds of billions of dollars of the economic migrants that go to different parts of the world. So you could actually benefit even if your population is leaving, as long as it is within the limits of the carrying capacity of the country itself that is sending people on the receiving countries. I'm not talking about immigration in general, but immigration by choice, where people go somewhere because of the needs of a certain skill set. But in the longer term, the whole population question has a lot of different shades. Like in India, to give an example of the country I come from, at one point of time, it was considered terrible in terms of the population explosion. Of course, now that is stabilizing, and the population in most parts of the country is reaching the replacement fertility rate of 2.1 per capita, and that's a good thing. But what has happened now is that almost 50% of the population is very young. So that's the demographic dividend that you get, and a lot of countries have that. But then there are countries like Japan and other countries, very advanced, developed countries, where the population has moved through that demographic transition of low birth rate and low death rate. So people have much larger life expectancy, much longer life expectancy. But people are not being born much anymore in the same numbers. So you have a very capable population, but not as productive as one ought to be in terms of economic contributions to the economic growth. And so, so it's kind of a mixed bag. So the answer, this is not a linear answer that if you have more people, can you remain sustainable? Because, if you look at India, unfortunately, if you take the COVID-19 exception, which has been really bad, but until then, it was growing at roughly anywhere between 7 to 10% every year. And that was much higher than the growth of the population. The population growth was roughly about 1.8% a year. Some years 1.5, between 1.5 to 1.8%. But if your population growth is 1.5 to 1.8, but if your economy is growing at 8 to 10%, of course the prosperity levels are going up, and the population growth is not counterbalancing your economic growth. So, so it's quite a complex picture. Unfortunately, no linear answers.
No, I don't think I should have expected one.
I have a question. I'm always trying to think of like super practical things that could be done that I'm not seeing done, and I don't know why that is. So for example, in Haiti, there's this practice where people who have the money, they'll pave their side of the street or their section of their side of the street. So you could literally be driving and seeing one side great, the other side full of potholes or completely, not working. So, and that's in the better parts of Haiti. In the other parts of Haiti, which struggle more, they have even less infrastructure. So I think why isn't part of the solution simply building out some roads? Because so many people don't have access to transportation anyway. Their own two legs are their transportation. So why not facilitate them being able to get to market by giving them better roads? And then whether they have to get donkeys or whatever else they have to get, they could more easily go someplace instead of being, flooded out, for example, when it's the rainy season. In some places, they're stuck and they literally can't go anywhere for weeks. Whereas if there was a bridge, maybe they could have walked over the bridge. If somebody is sick during the time of flooding, they could still get help. So these are some like super practical things. I don't see any sense of urgency to get things like that done that can help people. And those are things which could be very visible, progress. So how is infrastructure being taken into consideration, even if it's, through another department? And the second part of my question has to do with something you said before, because you talked about the quality of groundwater. A lot of people, they are doing their best, but they do have a lot of parasites. So they do have some access to water, but the water sources are contaminated and they can't exactly, they don't live in the capital, so they don't have access to water tablets to purify their tablets. So how can something like that be addressed for people who are, out in the boondocks? I pass.
Thank you. Our colleagues at UNICEF are working quite a bit on water and sanitation issues in around the world and also in Haiti. But then again, so their interventions are limited and primarily related to what they agree with the government, because as the UN goes into a country, it has no authority whatsoever to do something on its own, unless, of course, it is in a peacekeeping context where it is a transitional administration and the sovereignty passes on to the UN only to pass back to people once they have an elected government again in place. That's certainly not the case in Haiti. And so whatever the UN does is in partnership with the government and civil society actors, but certainly with the agreement of the government, because ultimately they are the representatives of the people. And you may or may not agree as to the beneficial nature of that arrangement, because we have certainly seen it in many parts of the world where the government doesn't speak for the people for whatever reasons. Sometimes it is ethnic reasons, sometimes it's racially motivated, sometimes it is economic motivation, or the government is full of people from a particular region who would like all the assets and resources to be invested in their region rather than across the country. So we see all these things, but unfortunately for the UN, despite its best interests or best eagerness to do the right thing, many times it is handicapped by what we agree with the government that should be a part of the program. Because when we talk about a sustainable development cooperation framework, it is something that is agreed with the government. So the UN has no role of its own to play in the context of any country. It is only in partnership with, you can partner with anybody, but it must be in agreement with the government. And that's how it is, unfortunately.
But since the UN is the one bringing in those resources, couldn't you play ball a little bit harder by saying, hey, you know, if unless you meet these criteria, we can't really partner with you on these things. That way, the civil society actors, as they're often called in Haiti, are not limited to people who have already a lot of concentrated power in their hands.
No, I mean, you know, I'm sure the colleagues do their best to see how best the beneficial arrangement is, but at the same time, the constraints are rather compelling because the people that run the government are the people who make those decisions. So while you can certainly push harder, but there are limits to the kind of creativity that the UN can bring into an arrangement like that, because it's the government which decides. Of course, you can build consensus, and and I have seen from my own experience that you can actually convince governments to do things differently. But sometimes that is not the case. Sometimes these things work, sometimes they don't. So it's a mixed bag.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
In terms of leveraging private funds, now I know now, for example, in Indonesia, I think you said that a lot of the investment, or at least initially, came from Michelin, which of course had an overriding interest because they like to have rubber plantations. Now,
the investment, of course, the equity investments came from Michelin, but the debt, which they were not able to obtain in the market, because when you're talking about 15-year debt, it is simply not available in the market. Market likes to give you debt for 3 years or 5 years at the best, or maybe even 7 years. So what we managed to generate for them was 15-year debt, because that's what you need to bring back a forest and protect the entire ecosystem and regenerate it. So it's a complex structure that we managed to pull together. But that was possible by building a narrative around people, around species, because it's a mega diverse flora and fauna, including the Sumatran tiger, the orangutans, the pangolins, and a lot of other species. And also the tree species are quite diverse, very rare. And so that the whole thing then worked out. Although until it got done, everybody that was a well-wisher of mine told me that I was crazy to believe this is possible. And then of course people would come up with questions like, what do you have that a bank that has $100 billion in their balance sheet doesn't have? Why do you think you can pull this off? And that banks, and there are so many of them, why haven't they done it? I said, because they charge by the hour. My charges are zero. Because when you charge by the hour, by the thousands of dollars, and you have to work for years to produce something, in a month's time, even if you're enthusiastic, the bill will be ballooning and somebody will pull the plug and say, okay, this is not going to work. We're not going to waste our money on this. But if you are relentlessly pursuing something, slowly chipping away at the problem, and we developed a model which is called the distributed risk model. It's, in a shared risk model, everybody swims or sinks together. But we took some inspiration from groups that go mountaineering, in high altitudes. So they are all connected to each other by a harness. So even if one person drops, everybody else then holds them back and pulls them together. It's not about sinking together, but about climbing together. So we said, okay, let's take a massive problem, break it down to manageable parts, and find partners that can deal with each of the parts. And there again, we found that for us to go to the market and raise the money, we need somebody to guarantee the first bond of $95 million. So I approached the US ambassador at that time, and the argument to them was that, listen, you spend a lot of money in this country and you achieve precious little, despite best intentions. Here is an opportunity where you can really do something I don't want any grants or subsidies from you. I just want a guarantee and I'm going to pay you for that. So we pay them a small fee for a guarantee that we got from USAID. And by taking that guarantee and creating that bond, I could raise money at 3%, whereas Michelin itself was being offered at 12% by the market. Because the moment you have a USAID counter guarantee, even if it is partial, then Moody's gave us a AAA credit rating, which is the same as US Treasury. And then we can go to the market and raise the money at ultra low costs for 15 years. And then that works for everybody because USAID gets paid for the guarantee. They didn't give any money, just a guarantee. And because we have a guarantee, we can raise the money. Because we can raise the money, the project happens and people benefit. The project will never fall apart because it's a private sector investment. It's not a donor project or a government project, so that when policy changes, the project falls apart. So there's a lot of lessons that we learned.
So
Yeah.
if I understand you correctly, that what you did was you got a loan guarantee from USAID.
Partial 40% guarantee.
And that way, actually, because my next question was going to be, how do you get a corporation that has no financial or development interest in the country? Now, in Haiti's natural resources have been pretty much tapped out. You can't get, you used to be able to get aluminum there. You can't get it anymore. That kind of thing. The forests are all cut down. There's almost nothing that a corporation would want to invest in.
No, there will,
You
because
would have,
Mother Earth
you would
is
have
still
that,
around.
that kind of guarantee to get them to invest in anything.
But no, you would need a guarantee, but the point is that the land is still there. The trees are gone, but the land is there. If you have the land, you can grow back the trees.
Even a lot of the land isn't there because it's gone into the ocean from
Yeah, the soil erosion and all. But then, but there will be, once you start looking at possibilities, you will find them.
I'm not saying there are no possibilities. You're right, but the point is you got to look for possibilities, and not everywhere. For example, in Haiti, there's no point in converting from chemical agriculture to natural agriculture because it was all natural all along. In fact, actually, I think there's one French historian that sort of said with his tongue in cheek, all the food that's produced in Haiti is organic.
No, that's true.
Not necessarily that it's going to wind up in Whole Foods, but it's that particular pathway isn't necessarily open there.
No, well, I haven't really. I must confess that I haven't looked at the economic possibilities in Haiti and what's possible. That would require somebody who really understands the country, the natural resource landscape, and the possibilities and the demand and supply, the value chains. That would require quite a bit of effort to really understand and appreciate what might work in Haiti. In my case, luckily for me, Indonesia, I had spent many years as someone who was running that $7 billion program, tsunami recovery. So I understood the country and the context very well. India, I understood very well because I was born and brought up there till I left the country as a young man. So you would need people with country expertise and that are able to spare some time to look at the possibilities. And then, it's a lot of hard work. When we did the first project in Indonesia, you'll be surprised. We were sitting together and we were all happy that we've managed to pull it off. And then somebody said, well, how much time did we spend? So we realized that we had 2,300 meetings. 2,300 meetings among different partners and so unduplicated meetings. So not counting your meeting with me as two. So that were 2,300 meetings. That's how much effort went in. But do we need to do that the next time? No, now we know what works. So the initial efforts are always daunting and they almost seemingly look impossible. But once you pull it off, even if you are, let's say it benefits 1,000 people, everybody will come. Now the whole world is going and looking at that project model. How do we replicate this? So as they say, success has many parents and failure is an orphan.
So this has been so wonderful, and we are just at our 8 o'clock hour. If you don't mind, Mr. Tripathi, maybe we'll take one more question from someone who's not yet had an opportunity to ask a question, and then we'll try to wrap it up for the evening. Is there one more question from Mr. Tripathi? Perhaps someone who's not had a chance to speak yet?
I just want to say that it was very inspiring, Mr. Tripathi, that one person can do so much. We'll definitely like to continue the conversation to see how we could get involved. And I just put a note in the chat that it is with this hope that we are pushing our students at Brookdale through our classes and all the activities to develop a sensitivity to global themes. So we always use the word glocal, meaning you don't have to go to the other part of the world to do something, just do it in your own backyard. And I'm very inspired. I'm a professor of psychology at Brookdale, but I'm so happy some of my students are here. And you have really inspired us with your very simple narrative, very straight from your heart. And that's what I took away from it. You know, all these lofty themes are always there, big talk, but somebody has to connect with us at that grassroots. And I want to just express my appreciation on behalf of Brookdale.
Thank you. Well, it was
Thank
not.
you, Dr. Raj.
I just, I often call myself a catalyst because the classic definition of a catalyst is someone or something that accelerates the abilities and performance of other elements without changing their own character.
Right.
So it's actually hundreds of people, that actually institutions that came together to produce these results. My role was absolutely negligible. Actually, it's just exciting few people, connecting a few people here and there, sitting patiently and listening to them and thinking through where are the next possibilities and where are the challenges, what are the possible roadblocks that we need to overcome. So it's more a benign facilitator than anything else. But you know, the greatest takeaway for me is the unadulterated happiness you get by helping others.
That's true.
And that, as they say, that is priceless. For everything else, you have the proverbial MasterCard.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Tripathi, it looks like we do have two more questions. I'm going to ask Marlene if you would like to, thank you, unmute and ask your question, and then good.
Okay. Hello, good evening. This is my first time actually attending this meeting. My question is basically, like the woman just said, you know, you're very inspiring. Actually, I feel a lot of hope for Haiti just from listening to you, because it sounds like if we could just get a few people together to think the right way and get something going, we can change things.
I'll be very happy to help.
Yes. So I want to know, how often do you have these meetings? So this is the first time I saw an invite, someone invited me. So I just want to be part of your group whenever you're having these meetings again.
Well, not me. I mean, I come in when somebody invites me to speak.
Okay.
I do, because I have a global responsibility. So I end up, like this morning started at 6 o'clock for me, speaking at a conference in the other side of the planet, in their afternoon actually. And so I contribute to the best of my abilities when I'm invited. So I'm not really a member of the group that meets often. This is the first time I have the privilege of joining this conversation, but it doesn't need to be the last. So to the extent you can pull together a group of people that want to think through the possibilities of what can be done, I'll be very happy to help. No questions.
Okay, thank you.
Partially answer that question. So Clinton Crocker, the late Clinton Crocker, was our co-founder together with his wife, Doris Crocker, back in 1976. And Doris is on the Zoom now. And at New Jersey Haiti Partners, we have a Zoom meeting every month to meet, and our Haiti New Jersey partners. So in New Jersey, we're called New Jersey Haiti Partners, and our sister chapter in Haiti is called Haiti New Jersey Partners. And the president of Haiti New Jersey Partners is here, Mario Henry. So there's definitely an opportunity to continue this conversation. The other thing too about our structure is that not only do we work with Brookdale in this capacity to bring this particular lecture on once a year. When the earthquake happened in Haiti, a lot of organizations did not really have boots on the ground in Haiti, and we did. And a lot of our members ended up being the eyes and ears for a lot of other organizations to make sure that money was being sent properly, that supplies were being distributed fairly, that people could get from one place to the next safely. So a lot of that coordination was done by our members in Haiti, even though they themselves, many of them, most of them had been affected by the earthquake, had sustained damage. So that's the beauty of this organization, that we're not an international organization, but really everybody is stateside. We literally have people from our chapter in Haiti who are there and they live there. So there's built-in accountability for any projects that are done through us or with us in Haiti. I think Robert maybe did not lower his hand from the first question. I'm not sure he has another question, but the other folks who are here, did you have anything more you wanted to say? Maybe Mario?
I actually did raise it again.
Oh, you
I
did?
make it
Okay.
quick. I just want to say thank you. And the main takeaway I'm getting kind of follows on what the gentleman said before, that most of the resources have been tapped. So to bring sustainability back to Haiti, I think the conversation would have to move back to making it attractive to investors the same way it was in Indonesia, so that they get a return on their investment by having their costs cut, so the money can get to the people who do mean well, and it goes in that full circle.
Agree. That's how it works. In the Indonesian case, the 88,000 hectares wasn't doing anything for the government because the forest was gone. It was all degraded land, completely destroyed. But now it has the world's largest sustainable rubber plantation in 4 years' time, employing 50,000 people. So as long as you have the land, I mean, it doesn't have to be those numbers. Those are the numbers in that context. In Haiti, it could be just 500 hectares somewhere. The idea is to produce a reasonable sized, successful model that everybody can then take inspiration from. Then they'll say, okay, it's possible. It's Haitians who are doing it. And if they can't do this, why can't we? And then you just replicate, So the theory of change, as I often say, is to incubate ideas, to mentor champions, to from finance projects, and to replicate success. It's a simple theory of change.
We certainly welcome you to continue staying in touch with us. And we look forward to having more events like this. And the conversation does continue through our monthly Zoom meetings with New Jersey Haiti Partners. Our meetings are typically the third Sunday of the month. Occasionally it changes because of holidays, but we'll keep you posted on all of that once you join us. And Nadine has put our website address in the chat, so make sure you grab that. We're also on social media. Please follow us there. NJ Haiti Partners is on Facebook as well as Instagram. So do join us. It was lovely having everyone here. Thank you again. That was such an enjoyable talk. All right. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thanks again, Mr. Tripathi, for an outstanding presentation. I really appreciate your coming and talking to us.
Thank you.